Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a very special guest, Carl Benjamin, also known as Sargon of Akkad, who is one of the preeminent cultural commentators on the right, I'd say. You've made quite a name for yourself. You've also been banned from several places.
A couple of places for bad reasons, I would say. But,
yeah,
you know, that's fine. You've got to push the boundaries to see where they are, haven't you?
So something I want to start with is a little bit inside baseball. Both you and I have recently been on Jesse Lee Peterson's podcast, and it was quite an experience for both of us. He was on this show a couple of weeks ago, and you did not see the ending, which was my favorite ending of any podcast I've done possibly. So I would love for you to take 30 seconds right now and follow that link and watch the end so we could see your Carl Benjamin reacts
okay.
to Jesse Lee Peterson and Michael Malice. I'll shut up now.
I'm watching it now.
Yeah.
Well, he's got you there, Michael. I mean, what are you going to say?
There it is.
He did that when you were on his show as well, didn't he?
For those of you who don't know what Carl just listened to, the very end of my episode of You're Welcome, which was 2 weeks ago, it was Jesse Lee Peterson being like, your interview is pretty good for a Jew. You a Jew, right? Yes, the whole time I was on his show, like 40 minutes, I had to defend the history of the Semitic people, which I wasn't a particular expert on, but here I am standing in for thousands of years of history.
I just love the way that he kept drilling. So what's your relationship with your father like? You're like, oh God. The whole thing, honestly, I sent your interview with him around to a bunch of people saying this is just, it was an hour of gold. It was pure gold to watch.
Well, I also felt it was a little obnoxious because I don't like talking about my family because they're not there to defend themselves. And I do not have a good relationship with my dad, but he saved my life. He got me out of Russia. He raised me. So for me to be kind of criticizing him in a public forum, I feel there's a little bit of disrespect. But at the same time, I didn't want to dodge the issue.
Yeah, and he's the sort of guy who just keeps asking the question until you damn well answer it.
Oh, so
yeah. You've just got to tackle it head on. I love Jesse Lee Peterson. I think he's hilarious.
What I wanted to talk to you about is you were one of the preeminent voices in the UK being pro-Brexit. It was very much the establishment, but the establishment right, if you consider the Tories to be right, and the Labour Party, although there were some pockets of Labour, surprisingly, who were quietly for it. It came through, obviously, then they were trying every step they could to kind of undo the referendum, and then it passed through. The predictions were, if Brexit comes to pass, it's going to be a disaster for the United Kingdom. Everything's prices are going to go through the roof, calamity, hell on earth. Can you, as someone who supported Brexit, do you regret it? Did those negative predictions come to pass?
Even if all of them had come to pass, it would still be the right thing to do. Because of the right thing to do in and of itself, whether we have to pay more for milk or something, we don't really. I think the price of milk's actually the same. Like I haven't noticed any price increases, and it would still have been worth it even if there was fires and floods and biblical disasters. Because at the end of the day, we shouldn't be ruled by Germany, and the European Union is basically a continuation of Germany by other means. I don't know why I have to say that. Britain should be ruled by Germany. Doesn't sound very controversial, but apparently nearly half the country was screeching about this and did for about 5 years. And they haven't let go, to be honest. A bunch of them are still going on about it. And it's like, no, it's over. Just deal with it. But everything's fine, basically. And they're blaming the global supply chain crisis on Brexit. And everyone's like, oh, really, really? So when did the United States leave the European Union? Because they're having a supply chain crisis as well. Right. And Australia and various other places like, no, it's something else that's causing this. But of course, because they hate Brexit, they're like, oh, well, this is because of Brexit. And the thing is, it's not even that bad. Like you'll go to the supermarket and it's like, oh God, I've only got 3 choices of cheeses when I normally had 5. Oh God, this is like a wasteland. This is the sort of level of deprivation we're living under.
And this is also kind of funny because not that long ago, for people in the West, an American don't realize that you had the Winter of Our Discontent, which is a little bit before your time. But basically, Britain didn't even have electricity. You had garbage that was 6 feet tall in the streets in Leicester Square. At a certain point, the people who were burying the gravediggers went on strike, and there were corpses piling up. So Britain has been through not even mentioning the Blitz, but even through simple socialism, Britain has been through much worse than only 3 cheeses on the shelves.
Yeah, I mean, my dad grew up in this era that you're talking about during the Winter of Discontent, and he has been an avowed conservative voter ever since, because it's the Labour Party and the stranglehold that the unions had on this country in that time that ended up with people working something like 3-day weeks. And like at points in his childhood, he remembers going without electricity, like this is some sort of third world country, and having rolling blackouts. And it's like, sorry, what the hell is going on? And of course, it's the way that the socialists run the country. And this is what led to Margaret Thatcher's like 12 years of, right-wing domination, which put the country back on its feet. And then we got some more left-wingers, and now we're stuck with the left-wing conservatives.
Yeah, something that people in the States don't appreciate is Boris Johnson, certainly by means of his temperament and personality, can be regarded as like a right winger in the right part of the Conservative Party. But his rhetoric and everything he's saying, he seems to be straight up like a cartoon caricature of globalism.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the Conservatives are very patriotic or very right wing. If that's something you care about, being a patriot and loving your country, well, the Conservatives are still doing exactly what the Labour government did when Tony Blair came in 1997. They haven't changed any of his policies. They haven't undone any of his constitutional reforms. And these are all slowly destroying the country. And I'm not even exaggerating that. I mean, you can look at the devolved parliaments in Wales and Scotland. They are just hotbeds of separatism. Since the devolved parliaments, Scotland's been taken over by the Scottish National Party, which is basically the Scottish National Social Party. And this is disgusting. They've both in Wales and Scotland, they've implemented vaccine passports. Hasn't happened in England, thank God, yet. This might age badly, by the way. So, but they've been basically taken over by a bunch of Nazis, sort of Celtic Nazis, if you can believe the thing. And this is a result of the devolved parliaments by creating sort of centers of power in Scotland and Wales where it didn't exist before. But again, these are constitutional reforms from Tony Blair. And then you've got like the Supreme Court. Now, as Americans, you're like, well, what's wrong with the Supreme Court? Well, they're political centers, and ours was created in 2009. I've got shirts older than our Supreme Court. And our Supreme Court, the only notable thing it's really done is try and intervene to overthrow Brexit. And it's like, no, sorry, I think this can go. Britain doesn't have the separation of powers that the United States has. It's all like the king's courts, the king's this, the king's that, because we're a monarchy. And so it's a constitutional monarchy, but a monarchy nonetheless. And so this is kind of an artificial organ that's been grafted on to the natural constitutionalism of the United Kingdom, and it doesn't really know its place, and it's currently jostling to see how much power it can exert. And trying to overthrow the Brexit referendum was one of those sort of attempted power grabs. Can this Supreme Court do that? I mean, thankfully it didn't, but it did try, and I'm not really very happy with that. It's clearly a very elitist institution that's gone very clearly against the will of the people. So the Conservatives basically could get rid of all of these things. They've got a massive majority in Parliament at the moment, so they can just do anything they want. And the thing is, in Britain as well, like Parliament is sovereign. Parliament can effectively do anything that it wants. And so the Conservatives could just sit there legislating like Tony Blair did. He passed hundreds of bills a day. Like more bills have been put through Parliament now from Tony Blair till now than from Tony Blair till 1066 when the Normans conquered England. More bills have been put through the Parliament. So you can see it's just like bill machine goes brr, and they just flood through all this left-wing nonsense. And the Conservatives could just sit there going undo, 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 but they don't. They don't change the amount of immigration. They don't change the taxes. In fact, they recently raised the taxes, very conservative. They're continually increasing social care. They're continually increasing money to the NHS. They govern like Jeremy Corbyn or Bernie Sanders would govern. And it's like, right, very, very tired of it. But we don't really have any alternatives because it's either that or communists. And it's like, okay, brilliant. So we're kind of screwed at the moment. And I don't know why the British public doesn't understand that the Conservatives aren't conservative as their taxes are going up. But if you look at a map of Britain, particularly a map of England, it's just becoming bluer and bluer and bluer, which is the color of their party. And the red dots, which are the Labour dots, are slowly shrinking into the very tiny urban centres. And yet, for some reason, the Conservatives are just terrified of actually doing anything conservative.
Yeah. So Margaret Thatcher, I don't know if you know this, was asked what her proudest moment of her part of her legacy is, and she said Tony Blair, by which she meant.
Oh God, did she?
By which she meant that a lot of Thatcherism had become part and parcel of even the Labour Party and wasn't going to be undone. Do you think so? Sir Keir, for Americans who don't know, is the one who took over after Jeremy Corbyn's historically debacle in the last election. He's being presented very much as a moderate figure. He doesn't like being called sir because he's a man of the people, like as if any member of parliament is just a man of the people. Is he in fact more of a Tony Blair figure, or is he just Jeremy Corbyn in a better suit?
No, he's not Jeremy Corbyn in a best suit, which is not hard because Jeremy Corbyn, his aesthetic was to dress as a scruffy hood rat. But no, he's not Jeremy Corbyn in suit. He is Tony Blair without the charisma. Okay. He would do all of the things Tony Blair has done, given the opportunity, in my opinion. But he doesn't have anywhere near the charisma. And so the Labour Party, and not beside the point, that niche has been filled by Boris Johnson, who has got way more charisma than Keir Starmer will ever have. So essentially, we are still being governed by Tony Blair. And the option is a less charismatic version of Tony Blair or the blue Tony Blair. So it's like, brilliant. Pick your poison, basically.
So something that Americans don't appreciate is there's a lot of people here, particularly members of the Libertarian Party, who are under the delusion that if there had been a viable third party option for America, America is going to be saved. The UK does have a third party that has been a historic third party, has governed with what's the guy who was before
the Liberal Democrats?
Yeah, no, but who
Conservatives?
Who was the prime minister at the time? The one before Theresa May.
It was David Cameron.
David Cameron, yeah, right. And he was
that was with Nick Clegg, who's currently some sort of corporate officer at Facebook.
Yeah, who was deputy prime minister. Joe Swinton, who had been head of the Liberal Democrats, had tried to campaign against it, and as a result, campaign against Brexit, lost her own seat, which I took great pains to remind her of on Twitter.
Thank you.
Don't
As
you
someone
feel,
who doesn't have a Twitter account, I appreciate
it's really great. I said, don't you feel that your disastrous loss on top of Theresa May, and there was a third one, is demonstrating to young women that they don't have a point of getting involved in politics? You got to hit them where it hurts. Below the belt. But yeah, of course. But if it's okay if it's a female, they don't get pain there, apparently. How can you explain to Americans what the role of the Lib Dems are, and do they serve any, like, who's voting for these people?
Yeah, well, the most insufferable people in society, right? Vote for the Liberal Democrats. Now, it's one thing being someone who votes Jeremy Corbyn, because you may well be a working class socialist who at least has convictions, who at least believes in their nonsense. And Jeremy Corbyn, for all his faults from like the conservative perspective, he at least has virtues from the socialist perspective. You know, he is at least a socialist. And so, you know, he's supported the people that socialists support. He's got a long track record of championing socialist causes.
He's a true believer.
He's a true believer, and he's a good socialist, you know, except that he's still alive. But like, you know, one day he'll become a great socialist. And like the conservatives are terrible, but they're technically the conservatives. And so in the middle, you've got this weird no man's land of like hyper Blairism, where you're like, right, we want open borders. We want to join the EU. We want to make sure that the only people whose voices are heard are those people, the sort of single degree holding midwits who live in almost entirely white British areas, who have never even met a member of a minority group. And those people in sort of like, you know, areas, the sort of, you know, the occasional city in Devon or somewhere in the north where no one has ever been in 20 years or something, you know, like nice affluent places that have got leafy, you know, nice countryside around. And there's never been a hate crime because there just isn't another race to have a hate crime with. And there's never been a murder in this town for like 50 years or something. That kind of person votes Liberal Democrat. Someone who's totally out of touch with what the world is actually like is this kind of Liberal Democrat voter. And they got crushed because there's just no demand for that, thank God, until the conservatives screw up, and then they'll end up coming back again. But then what are we going to do?
Are you familiar with the acronym AWFUL?
No.
Affluent white female liberal.
Oh yes.
So it seems like the Lib Dems are the people who read like Jacobin or not Jacobin, the New Yorker,
Jacobin, no.
the New Yorker.
Yeah.
And because they read an article in the New Yorker, they think they've been informed on some kind of societal mystery, and now they're in a position to tell everyone else. I saw this cool restaurant I read in New Yorker. You probably haven't heard of it. Oh, there really are horrible people, and they're
insufferable.
And it's unfortunate because they're the legacy of the Liberal Party, which a century ago was the governing party in the UK, which had brought so many ideas that you and I think many other people would support. And now so they're the neoliberals. They really are this kind of Davos group too.
Well, worse, they're the woke neoliberals.
Oh, God.
And Joe Swinton really had a viral moment trying to define the word woman on radio live, and she had like this 20-minute meltdown because she had no idea what woman was from a woke perspective. From like a normal perspective, it's an adult human female, but from the woke perspective, well, there is no definition of woman, or at least not one that she can pin down. And so they're woke virtue signaling neoliberals who think that we should be part of the EU and have open borders forever. And it's like, right, that's awful in every way.
There's someone else I want to talk to you about regarding British politics, which I think Americans, I drop these names, guys, look these people up because they're going to be a lot of fun. Probably the stupidest woman in Britain, which is...
let me guess. Right. So you must be talking about Diane Abbott.
Bullseye. Yes. Diane Abbott is a national treasure. For those who don't know, one time she went to go vote, and not only did she have two mismatched shoes, they were both
two left
shoes.
Feet.
They were both shoes for the left foot.
Yep. But Diane Abbott she's got this long history of these just car crash events. I mean, she went on TV once and she was, been asked about Chairman Mao, and she was like, "Oh, I think he did more good than harm." It's like, more good than harm? He killed 30 million people. Like, how much good did he do? And then there was another time.
But he saved 40 million. Just do the math.
Well, I mean, this is Michael Portillo, as a conservative politician, was just sat next to her. He was just like, what? Because he obviously knows what he did.
Yeah.
There was another time where she's like, "Oh yeah, we're hiring like 30,000 police officers," and the interviewer was like, "Oh, how much are you spending?" She's like, £350,000, and he was like, "What? What are you paying them?" She's just a complete national treasure, as you say, and it's going to be a sad day when she's no longer in politics.
Hey guys, want to talk to you about one of my favorite sponsors. They've been sponsoring us for a while, and that is Fume. So Fume is the #1 best natural way to quit smoking. What is Fume? They have a steampunk vape. It's actually made out of Canadian wood, carved, no smoke, no moving parts. They take the benefits of super plants, behavioral science, and beautiful design to make quitting smoker a bit easier. These are plant-packed cores studied to help curb cravings and taste and smell great. And you don't know what to do with all you smokers out there, all you people who vape, you don't do with your hands. That's where Fume comes in. Head over to breathefume.com/malice, breathefum.com/malice, and you get 10% off. And they have something now called the Quit Naturally Pack. It's 1 fume and 4 packs of cores studied to curb cravings and get you on the path to being nicotine free. Shop Breathe Fume and save 10% with code Malice10, and it'll help you save money and get off of that filthy habit that's ruining your health.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Pedicy.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying, Jonah Goldberg, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know, and I'm very excited to tell you this, there is footage on YouTube of Diane Abbott during Prime Minister's questions asking Margaret Thatcher questions. Did you know this?
I don't know that.
There's a Venn diagram of these two women, and you watch this and you're like, how is this? We're in the best timeline.
Yeah. Margaret Thatcher must have been so disdainful.
No, she was very respectful.
Really?
Because I don't think Diane came to her own yet. You know what I mean? She wasn't this kind of force of nature on the left where it's just like a tornado of like, oh my God, what is this woman going to say next? Yeah. Let me ask you this, as Jesse Lee Peterson would say. Where is Britain right now on a scale? I'm sure you've obviously been following the lockdowns. You've been following the rise of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Where do you guys sit between the U.S. and Australia? Where are you closer? And I want to hear your concerns and about where it's heading and how likely those concerns are.
Well, like the United States, because we have these devolved parliaments, we have different rules for different areas of the United Kingdom. In Wales and Scotland, it's quite tyrannical. You have mask mandates, you have mandatory vaccine passports, and you have genuine psychos running your government. I mean, I think it was the Scottish Health Minister. I can't remember his name because it's a foreign name, but he came out and on Question Time the other day, a BBC show that's mainstream politics. He basically said, "Look, we know where the unvaxxed live. We know their addresses. We know how that they're unvaxxed. So we should go door to door and vaccinate them." And it's like, all right, you Nazi. Why don't you smash up their shops in the meantime?
Yeah, right.
Freaks, and so the Celtic nations have just willingly fallen to tyranny because the English are trying to resist tyranny. In England, we don't have any restrictions. We don't have any mask mandates. And I see, like, if you go back 2 or 3 months, about half the people were wearing masks just because that was what you were supposed to do. But now it's probably one in 5 people you see wearing masks. So it's very much dropped off because, like, you look around and everything's just normal. There aren't people dropping in the streets or anything. And so, yeah, no restrictions in the restaurants, in bars or anything like that. And everything's fine. And they're complaining about the number of cases that we have, but like 80% of the population has been double jabbed. And it seems that the vaccines work. So, okay, let us get on with our lives, so the cases are, there are tens of thousands of cases. Yeah, but there are hardly any deaths, like a few hundred old people or something. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. So let's not just tyrannize ourselves. And then on the other scale, you've got Australia, which is, it's being run by Nazis. It's being run by the people with the attitude, the authoritarian attitude of the Nazi party. And I can't stand watching it, to be honest. I actually genuinely hate it. And it's the way that they're going on about compliance. That's what this is about for the Australians. It's not about your safety, obviously. And you don't need me to tell you that, but it's the attitude that you see, the sort of, was it the Victorian Premier, I think it was, where he's literally berating people for being disobedient. It's like, and there's a commentator over here called Helen Dale. She's an Australian, and you should definitely get her on sometime. She's really interesting. She's this giant Australian lesbian, and she's great. She's hyper conservative. She's hilarious. But she's like, look, you got to remember, right, that Australia, it was a prison colony.
Yeah.
But the descendants, the people there are descendants of prisoners, but also the prison guards. And so this kind of authoritarian attitude is kind of baked into the Australians in a way that we in America and Britain don't really understand. So
so it sounds like the UK is a lot closer to America than it is to Canada, ironically enough, because the Canadian system, I'm sure you had the similar reaction I did when you're watching people who are conducting prayer services being interrogated by the police. Would that fly in Great Britain? I would like to say no, but in these strange times, I don't think I'd have the balls to categorically commit. It would be very much frowned upon by the English. I don't know what the Celts are doing. The Celts seem to be all fine with this kind of tyranny. I don't know why there aren't like mass protests or anything in the Scottish and Welsh areas. But I think a lot of it really comes down to kind of an anti-English animus, where it's like, well, the English are doing this. Well, we have to do the opposite. I see what you're saying.
We see this kind of policy making all the time with the Scottish National Party and the Welsh Assembly. It's really insufferable. It's just so transparently like, well, Boris wants to open up because, that's the right thing to do. And they're like, well, we're going to lock down for longer then. It's like, okay, well, fine. You can do that, but that's evil, but I guess there's a sizable contingent of Scots and Welsh who just kind of hate England. It's like, okay, well.
We had the similar thing before the November election, which is there are very many prominent people, including current Vice President Officer Kamala Harris, who were insisting that they were not going to take a Trump vaccine, as if somehow Donald Trump is in a laboratory holding a blue liquids in a beaker up to the light, with the goggles on and pouring things. And he's like, all right, it's ready to go. It's tremendous. I've never seen a vaccine like this. It cures everything. I don't have. It's really, I think you have to laugh. Because if you take back and realize that these people are willing to play politics in the midst of a plague that has killed millions worldwide, and just brazenly lying to get people to either be more scared or for their own power, it's a very disturbing situation. But I think the mask has dropped in many senses.
Well, it absolutely has. And in your country's case in particular, these people are in charge. Like, I mean, a year ago, America had the best economy on record. It was genuinely roaring. I mean, Donald Trump has got many, many faults, but being a good businessman is actually not one of them. He's actually quite savvy when it comes to this. And he's got a good gut instinct for protecting American interests.
Yeah.
Whereas Joe Biden is deliberately selling them out. I see a lot of Americans saying, "Oh, well, they've abandoned the borders. We don't have any borders anymore." No, you absolutely do. You had the borders, instead of being at the edge of your country, they shrank right to your capital. We had 25,000 soldiers and barbed wire fencing around your capital. There are borders there. It's just that you're not within them. And that's how the Biden regime looks at this. They are doing everything they can to ruin your country. You wouldn't just pour trillions of dollars into the economy and liquidate the price of your money if you wanted to protect your economy. You wouldn't be sat there like, I mean, I honestly have, like, I've heard that it's regulations that are causing supply chain disruptions. I don't know that for certain, so don't take my word for it. But if that's the case, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't green regulations that were doing damage here, well, what a shock. These people appear to think they have the capacity to essentially use the state to fix everyone's problems. Now, I don't think the state can fix many people's problems at all, because it's a great unwieldy beast at the best of times. But are the Biden administration really the best and brightest big brains who are like, yeah, we've got the administrative nous to fix all of this? No, you don't. No, you don't. That's unbelievably arrogant and dangerous. And basically, it's turning me more and more anarchist the more I watch it, frankly.
Okay.
I kind of hate the state at this point.
Well, that's great. That is basically the most important criterion. It's, do you hate the
I knew you'd
state?
like it.
Of course, you're. I mean, the book's right there. It's still.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the EU. The EU is
Oh.
really, in many ways, I think, much more even of a cartoon hive of supervillainy than Americans appreciate. I mean,
Yes, it is.
one of the great moments in EU history was when Nigel Farage, got up on the floor of the EU Parliament and was yelling at he was from what, the Dutch or something like that,
I
saying
think
that
it's Jean-Claude Juncker you're thinking of.
but he was saying you're not even from a real country.
Belgium.
Belgium. Yeah, thank you. And the sooner you're put out to pasture, the better we'll all be for it. But it seems like such a cabal of such out of touch, international cartoon characters who only have nefarious designs, especially vis-a-vis increasing their own power at the expense of any single nation, and regarding nationhood by itself as something historically outdated. And now that we're in the 21st century, we should have a giant nation which is somehow better and different. Is that analysis inaccurate?
Well, it only seems that way because it is that way. I mean, you can't fault your analysis there at all. They're trying to create essentially an empire across Europe, and they want to homogenize Europe. And this is why you get massive cash flow between the wealthy nations to the poor nations. Now, the poor nations are happy with that, except they're quite socially conservative, and the EU is woke. It's very liberal Democrat, shall we say, on almost every issue.
Yeah.
And so when the Polish or the Hungarians like, we're just not doing that, the EU, you'll get for example, the Poles are heavily Catholic, deeply devoutly Catholic, and the Dutch aren't. And this is very, very confusing, because then the Poles are like, well, we're not going to do all of this LGBT bollocks. We think that's basically a form of perversion and pedophilia, so you can piss off. And the Dutch were like, right, we need to kick Poland out of the European Union. And I'm like, yes, come on, let's do it. Let's do this, And then the Hungarians are doing exactly the same. The Hungarians banned Viktor Orban from the country for subversion and closed down his university because, of course, what do you think they were producing at this university? Well, LGBT propaganda. I actually went to the university's website and had a look at all the courses. It's like the worst of critical race theory. It's like, okay, what colonial empire did Hungary have? Like, is there a black person in Hungary? Like,
Right.
Point them out. Where could this possibly be useful for Hungary? Why should Hungary be burdened with white guilt? It's the same for like Denmark and stuff like that. It's like, what, why should these? I mean, Denmark's actually a lot more sort of based than most other countries, but the point is, the European Union is a horrific compromise and is frankly falling apart. And is eventually a bunch of the other major countries will, I think, leave, and then it will turn into a German rump state ruling over parts of Eastern Europe. And as returning to its historical roots as the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's awful. It's a technocratic, plutocratic nightmare that is essentially an administrative vanguard trying to, again, in the same way that the Democrats are trying to do in the United States, to homogenize Europe and to turn it into something that adds up on a spreadsheet. And that's awful, in my opinion.
I don't know if they had the same kind of toy stores that in the UK as they did here in where I grew up in Brooklyn. I don't know if you follow this, but Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, the largest state by population in America, he recently passed a law where you can't really have different toy aisles for boys and girls. And I remember as a kid, if you're looking for toys and you accidentally turn the corner, end up in Barbie Land where everything's pink, you just had a panic attack because God, if someone spotted you in Barbie Land, it's the end of you. Is that sort of thing must be trickling over into the UK as well?
No, that hasn't happened here, thankfully.
Okay.
Although doubtless, now that you've said it, tomorrow Scotland will announce it. I mean, Scotland is genuinely, they wish they were California. They really wish they did. I mean, for example, like the state put up signs in bus stops and train stations that just read, "Dear racists, we hate your racism. Dear transphobes, we hate your transphobia." It's like, right. So Scottish taxpayers are now being forced to pay money to be propagandized and being told that they're bad people by the Scottish government. Who wants that? You know, who asked for that? But, you know, well, the Scots vote for the SNP, so I guess that must be what they're for. But no, we are, at least in England, we're not that woke yet. And there is some pushback against critical race theory. There have been a few high-profile conservatives who have said, hang on a second, isn't this a bit racist, chaps? And it's like, yes, it's obviously racist. You know, you can spend 5 seconds reading anything by a critical race theorist. And the line one is, so we want to be as racist as the KKK, just for black people. It's like, right, okay, there we go. You know, you know exactly how racist it is. So there has been pushback about this in England, at least. But they're in Wales, they've decided that what they need is more black people in charge, because there are loads of black people in Wales, apparently. People in America probably haven't, like George Bush, ever heard of Wales. So they probably won't realize that it's basically a small nation within the United Kingdom, in the west of it, with about 3 million Welsh people and a few sheep. That's it.
And lots of extra consonants.
And well, they speak the same language as Cthulhu. So and they have very long demonic words. But basically, they don't have very much immigration. They've got some in Cardiff, but what their complaint is that 1.3% of the population of the professors in Wales are black. But I mean, I'd really be surprised if 1.3% of the population of Wales is black. But either way, they've embarked on this woke initiative to hire people based on their race. That's it. You know, we just need more blacks. So okay, why? What made you think this? You know, American race politics made you think this, and we know this because recently there was a small YouTube channel called Voice of Wales. They had like 10,000, 12,000 subscribers, something like that, and they were just a couple of working class lads, you know, Welsh lads who were just good-hearted guys. You know, they weren't racist, obviously, but they were just like, well, look, we don't like how Wales is changing under these, you know, Welsh socialist parties. We've got an objection here, and so the Welsh local government contacted the BBC, who then contacted YouTube and got their channel taken off. Wow. It's like they've got 10,000 subscribers, but because they called themselves Voice of Wales, the Welsh Parliament went nuts over them and had to get them deplatformed. And the main reason, it seems, is because they went to the Welsh National Arts Centre and did a video going, why is Martin Luther King on there? Why is George Floyd on there? What have these got to do with the Welsh National Arts Centre? And obviously nothing. What they are is American ideology that's been imported via Twitter into Wales, which is a small and parochial place. So not where it's appropriate to have Black Lives Matter. But that's what's going on over here. They're going woke.
It's very interesting because Americans tend to view all other politics through the American lens, and the American media very much plays into this. So Viktor Orban is basically, and Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil are basically described as Trumps of their own country, whereas there's enormous differences between the three men, and especially between the two and Trump himself. It also sounds like what you're saying, to get all Kathy Newman. My understanding was that Scotland is is somewhat poorer than the rest of the UK, that they get a lot of money from Great Britain. So it
From
seems
England,
like
yeah.
from England, yeah, sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
It seems like socioeconomically there's a disconnect, because in America, wokeism is very much a function of college educated urban white people, but you were not going to find that as much among kind of the working poor. Is that a difference with the Scottish?
Right. So Scotland is a nation. So it has its own urban elite centres in Edinburgh and probably in Glasgow as well. And so in these areas, you have relative opulence. And so while Scotland as a whole is poorer than England and receives English taxpayer money to pay for its free services, in the centers of administration, you still get this kind of very left-wing, university-educated, politically correct, woke proselytizers, and the same in Cardiff in Wales. But again, they really only exist because of English taxpayer money, and we should have abolished the devolved parliaments anyway, so they couldn't exist. But no, it's smaller and more cringy when they do it, because they're trying to act as if they're Joe Biden's administration. Oh, we control, we're an administrative state, and therefore we're big and important and powerful, except they're not, and they're embarrassing, and nobody likes them.
Do you ever feel like you're being followed around the internet? Maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you? Well, our sponsor, IPVanish VPN, is here to help you take back your privacy, or privacy, as Carl would say, and help you become anonymous on the internet. IPVanish is a virtual private network. That's a VPN for short. And it's an important tool that helps you safely browse the internet. You can use a VPN on your computer, your tablet, your phone, even things like your Fire Stick if you're streaming media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're reading, what you're searching, what you're watching, whatever you're doing. And that's important because what you're doing on the internet is no one's business but yours. And for listeners of You're Welcome, IPVanish is offering an awesome deal, 65% off their annual plan. So that's only $3.75 a month. It's super easy to use. You turn on with one click and it runs seamlessly in the background, helping to protect you while you're browsing the web. You boomers will be able to figure it out. If you do run into a problem, boomers, no problem. They have 24/7 support available by email, chat, and telephone. So go to ipvanish.com/malice and use promo code MALICE, that's MALICE, to claim your 65% savings. Their annual plan is just $44.99 for the first year with our exclusive discount. Now's the time to sign up. With their discount and their current promotion, you can get a VPN for 65% off their usual offering. It's the best of the best, rated 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot, and that's with more than 6,000 reviews. Remember, ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting yourself online. Guys, you are listening to the podcast of an author, troll, but also underwear model. And the underwear I model and wear every day is Sheath Underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code MALICE, you get 20% off. Here is why Sheath is the underwear I wear every day. It's got dual pouch technology for both parts of your male anatomy. Sounds weird. You try it on, you're like, oh, this is super comfortable. Plus, if you're talking to someone, if you're at a job interview and a date at work, there's something a little subversive about having your underwear cupping your genitals. Sheath Underwear is focused on your comfort. It's the most comfortable underwear you're ever going to wear. They've got new additions like bamboo and mesh to make it even cooler in the summertime when you're working out, so on and so forth. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code MALICE, you get 20% off today. Support the underwear that supports your favorite programs, and that's Sheath. Added comfort, added performance, added mobility, and they look really cool. There's a lot of styles there to choose from. Go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code MALICE. You get 20% off, and you'll be one step closer to being an underwear hunk like myself and possibly Carl. Let's get back to the show. Have you been following the recent elections in Germany and what happened there?
I haven't actually. I've heard some controversial things that apparently you're not allowed to talk about on YouTube, though.
Well, I mean, can you use pig Latin? What do you?
There was no fortification in Germany,
Oh,
just like there was
I
no
see what you're saying.
fortification in America at all, and that's probably as far as we can take that. But I haven't got any evidence, or I've just heard rumors. That's all.
Well, it seems that for the first time since Merkel's reign, they're going to vote in the Social Democrats in coalition with the Green Party. And for the first time in post-war German history, you're going to have a three-party coalition and the Free Democrats, who are ostensibly the pro-business party. And it's just going to be a complete Frankenstein monster of three ideologies that when political parties work together, it's almost so much worse than when they're just trying to do their own thing, because just what ends up happening is just like, how did you think this is going to be a good idea? But then at the same time, it co-opts any kind of alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dubious as well, because the Germans have got this weird habit of essentially voting for Kaisers. They well, they do. They like Merkel was in power for like what 14 years or something
crazy like that. Yeah,
unbelievable. Like they just like to vote for the same person forever, as if they're looking for a monarch. And it's like, okay, and so when you get this position where like obviously no one's going to have a total hegemony on the state, it's like, okay, well, who knows what follows from this? So I guess we'll have to watch with bated breath and butterflies in the stomach to see how Germany militarizes this time.
What is going on with was it Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? It seems like such a disaster from this side of the pond, and she seems like a clear sociopath gold digger, and yet it seems like people in Britain are actually like her. And what am I missing here?
No, the British hate her,
okay.
And the woke Londoners love her because she is satisfyingly woke. But the general British public see her as some sort of what Callum described it the other day as a plutocratic Yankee changeling.
Yeah.
It seems like the best way to describe it, doesn't it? She looks like the sort of person who has married into the monarchy in order to damage the monarchy. She looks like she's done everything to undermine it and break it apart, and she's taken a part of it away with her. And so she's not very popular in Britain, I would say, amongst the regular folk. But she is, of course, popular with the media class. But then she's their darling. She's their avatar, isn't she? So.
Another figure which I hope everyone looks up is Prince Andrew. Am I getting it right? The Queen's son.
Yes.
Yeah. So he had this train wreck interview regarding his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and if you go and watch it, I don't understand how someone who has such a position of prominence didn't have any sort of media training, because at one point he said he flew to America to tell Jeffrey Epstein they would no longer be able to speak, and as if he can't get someone on the phone, the prince.
Yep.
And then he said, I never saw him again. And the interviewer is like, well, there was this dinner that he's like, no, I wasn't there. She goes, you were the guest of honor. And at another point in the interview, he insists that he couldn't have been with some woman because he lost the ability to sweat in the Falklands War, but he regained it later. Currently, my understanding is
about the time of this interview. Incidentally.
Yeah. But my understanding is that Scotland Yard recently said they're not going to be pursuing any more charges against him.
Yes.
Is this guy getting away with trafficking? And is the British public comfortable with that?
No, his name is mud with the British public. Thankfully, the British public are thankfully very I guess you call them reactionary. They're incredibly far right in almost every sort of social way, but they're quite fair-minded. They don't want any individual person to be like, told or harassed or bullied or anything like that. But when someone's like, hey, I've got an idea, or this person did something, they're very judgmental. And they don't want change, basically. And when someone's like essentially outed as an international pedophile, like Andrew was, and I guess you can sue me if you disagree with that, Andrew. We'll see where that goes in the courts. Yeah. Then obviously they don't like that. One of the great mortal sins in this country, thank God, is to be a pedophile. And having one of the royals, a prince, apparently be one, at least cavorting with pedophiles, and having a woman saying, well, hey, he raped me when I was a minor. I didn't
realize it was that bad. I thought it was just like 18-year-old. Wow. Literal rape accusations.
Was she didn't. I think she said she was 15 when.
Holy crap! I did not realize.
She was a masseuse for Epstein. And the thing is, I read through the Epstein depositions as well, all like 600 pages of them. And there are lots of girls who were accused. Ghislaine Maxwell used to go out and get these like 13, 12, 14, that sort of age girls to take to Epstein's Florida mansion. And who knows what more happened that we just haven't been privy to understanding. It seems that Epstein was the orchestrator, Epstein and Maxwell, the orchestrators of an international pedophile ring, which is why he was charged and convicted of child trafficking, and wasn't actually sex with a minor as well. He was charged with, which is why he was arrested again, and of course committed suicide in prison. There's a reason that this is all happening, and I think that is true. And Andrew, I think, has been understood by the British public to be part of it, and I don't think that's ever going to go away.
But is there that sort of further blowback towards the royal family in terms of them covering for him and running interference to make sure it doesn't face any consequences?
Yeah, that's a great question. He's not going to face any consequences because he's a member of the royal family. I don't think it's going to damage the monarchy as an institution, but essentially the Queen has distanced herself from him. And so essentially being like, look, you're getting nothing, go away. He'll still live a life of luxury, unfortunately. He'll still, everything will be fine for him. But the institution itself, I think, is essentially putting him on the outside of it, as I understand it. I may be wrong. Feel free to correct me if I am, by the way.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, so he's not going to face any crimes charges for this. Nothing's going to happen to him, unfortunately.
What some Americans don't appreciate or may not have heard is that in the last couple of weeks, a British member of parliament, conservative, was murdered, I believe in church. No, not by Alec Baldwin, but by a random crazy person who was arrested at the time. Can you let us know what the circumstances of that were and what your thoughts about that? Because it's just absolutely horrifying. Because he was stabbed. He wasn't even shot, correct?
He was stabbed something like 17 times.
Yes.
So there was a long-term and well-loved Conservative MP for, I think it was South Essex, called Sir David Armes. He was knighted in 2015, and when he was knighted, he dressed up in a full suit of armor for it, to make the point that he exactly had a great sense of humor and he was a really nice guy. He supported Black Lives Matter, he supported refugees, and then the other day, a Somalian refugee murdered him in cold blood in the middle of a church. David Armes was a public Christian, and the man who murdered him was a Muslim jihadi. And he apparently got the bus, something like 50 miles, something like that, or the train, 50 miles, lied about living in his constituency to gain entry to the surgery, sat there for an hour or something, politely waiting. Then when it was his turn to speak, he just walked up, pulled out a knife, and just stabbed him to death repeatedly. And then just sat there waiting for the police to turn up to arrest him. And so we went through the usual sort of carousel of politically correct defenses when someone like this does this. Oh, well, he was poor. Oh, he was mad. He didn't know what he was doing. Oh, and it turned out that none of these things were true. He lived in a very wealthy area of London. His father was an ex-Somali government minister, advisor. So they obviously had made some money somehow and bought themselves and found themselves a nice place in London. And he had gone to one of the most prestigious schools in Britain. I can't remember the name of it. It was the same school that Roger Scruton, the philosopher, went to. It was a very well-to-do grammar school, and he had an excellent education, and he'd done this rationally and in cold blood. And it seems, and if you look at the guy, he's not a rough-looking guy. He looks like a nerd. He looks like a scholar. And so this appears to be a case of ideological radicalization. And no one can talk about it. No one wants to talk about it. No one has had any conversation about this.
Wow.
No one on the left, of course, wants to touch this because it makes Islam look like a philosophy that creates murder like him.
Yeah.
Murder, yeah. And I mean, I'm in Britain, so there's only so much I can say.
Sure.
And the Conservatives, for some reason, instead of talking about this, a Christian was murdered in a church by a Muslim. Is there a religious dimension to this? For some reason decided, the problem here is online anonymity. Sorry, what? Online anonymity? I didn't kill anyone. Didn't kill anyone, ever, in fact. This is not the problem. But they started complaining, well, we as MPs are getting harassed on Twitter all the time. We need to end online anonymity so these people who are harassing us can have charges against them. It's like, aren't you bothered that one of your friends, longtime friends, has been murdered in cold blood in a church? And he was doing what they call a constituency surgery. And so this is not a medical thing. This is just where literally they turn up in a local building and the members of the public can come in and talk to them. Sort of thing an open society used to do.
Like a town hall, yeah.
Yeah, like a town hall, exactly. And no one seems to care. No one seems to want to talk about it. And the only conversation we've had about it is, well, maybe we need security there. It's like, oh okay, that's just it. That's just the end of the story, is it? Sure, get security. Go on then. Because I mean, this is not the first time this has happened. In 2010, another MP got stabbed by a Bangladeshi woman, I believe it was, who was radicalized. She took a carving knife, went up to him and just stabbed him a couple of times. He didn't die, thankfully, but she was a radical Islamist. And this guy Ali, who stabbed Sir David Armis, he was apparently radicalized by Britain's most famous jihadi, Anjem Chowdhury, who's literally someone who just got out of jail for being a terrorist. For some reason, he hasn't been deported. I don't know why. He's still at large in this country. But apparently it was his videos that radicalized him. So, there's a direct connection there, and there's nothing that anyone wants to say about any of that. So there we go.
I mean, that's somewhat surprising because here in the States, whenever something happens, it becomes a complete political football, even if it's something that is a complete non sequitur. I remember very specifically when Timothy McVeigh blew up the building in Oklahoma City during the Clinton administration using fertilizer and to make a homemade bomb. The next day, Bill Clinton was on TV making sure that we should be pushing for gun control, even though no guns were used in the commission of that heinous murder. So it's kind of a surprise to see that that's not happening here with him. But go ahead, you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, the thing that annoys me the most is that it's clearly part of a kind of slow-moving religious attack on Christians. I'm an atheist personally. I used to be an anti-theist, I guess. Go back 10, 15 years. But now I certainly wouldn't consider myself an anti-theist, and I may be an atheist, but I guess I would be pro-Protestant if I had to choose a religious position now, even though obviously I'm not in any way religious. But I support the idea that Europe is a culturally Christian continent, and the Catholics deserve some protection. I mean, you get all across France, which has had massive amounts of Muslim immigration, churches just burned down at the rate of one church every 2 weeks.
Is that right?
And that's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's according to the Religious Observatory of Paris. That every 2 weeks a French church burns down, and 2/3 of these burnings are arson, confirmed as arson. The other ones are just, well, maybe, who knows?
Like Notre Dame, right? It was just a coincidence. Like Notre Dame, it was just a coincidence.
Exactly. It well, who knows why this is happening? There's no jihad going on in France, comrades. And this, I mean, priests and nuns have been murdered in remarkable numbers in France. But this is the first really high-profile murder of a Christian in Britain, and it seems that this wasn't an accident. Like, David Armis was a public Christian. It was well known he was a Christian. It's hard to believe that a Christian man gets murdered in a church by a Muslim and there's no religious dimension to it. Because I received an email from a subscriber of mine who lives in Pakistan.
Let me just interrupt, because it also seems, I don't know him, that his career, but he seems pretty amiable. He's not some kind of radical fire breather. It's not like like it's a figure was like, okay, like Trump, where everyone hates him. This guy,
no.
He's like a milquetoast guy that no one really cared about one way or another, except he seems like a nice guy.
If anything, everyone loved him. Apparently,
yeah.
You get this from all wings of politics. We're all like, oh my God, I knew David Armis for 20 years. He was a lovely guy who was very conciliatory to all political allegiances. And yeah, he was he's the sort of turn the other cheek style Christian, right? The very loving and caring, the righteous version of Christianity. And so the fact that I got years ago now, I got an email from a subscriber in Pakistan who himself was an ex-Muslim, but of course couldn't say anything because that would have got him murdered. And he was like, look, you've got to understand Islam, right? Imagine that you're talking to a leftist, but instead of race, they look at religion. Like, so it's you're not talking to a white nationalist or a black nationalist. You're talking to a religious nationalist. So they think of people as being Christians, as Muslims, or as heretics, or polytheists, whatever. That's how they see the world. They don't view the world in terms of race or politics like you do. They view the world in terms of religions, and that's a part of the Islamic mindset. And you have to understand that. And so Islam, in its most sort of extreme form, is Islamic supremacy, religious supremacy. And you don't really have that because you're in the sort of, almost a post-Christian position with the West. So you guys don't see religion in the same way they do.
Right.
You've got to understand how they look at the world. And so okay, for me and for the normal mainstream, oh, Sir David Armes was stabbed, that's terrible, at a constituency surgery. But for the Islamists, a Muslim murdered a Christian in a church. That's what they see. And the fact that we can't, the mainstream here doesn't acknowledge that is disturbing, to say the least.
Something you hinted at earlier, and something that's made fun of a lot on the internet, is the ability of people who are British to have some sort of free speech online. Just how bad is it, and where are the boundaries that they're enforcing?
Well, that's a great question. Where are the boundaries? Nobody really knows.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the way the common law works is that it's discovered and not dictated.
Right.
And so until you commit a crime, you don't know you've committed a crime. So like Count Dankula being the perfect example, he made a joke video teaching his dog to do a Nazi salute because it's funny and it would wind up his girlfriend. And he was found to be inciting hate speech or something like that. And he got fined £800 and now has a criminal record because of a meme that he posted. And this happens to thousands of people every year. Literally thousands of people end up getting either fined and criminal records, and a few of them get jail time over things they post on Twitter or Facebook. This can be as innocuous as one girl in Liverpool on her Instagram. A friend of hers died, was hit by a car, and so she posted the lyrics to his favorite rap song. Rap song may have contained the N-word. Was the lyrics to the song. She had to be put in a tag, and she spent something like 2 weeks under house arrest or something like that.
Crap.
Yeah, I know, it's mad. It's genuinely mad. And like, so right, we don't have free speech in this country, and it seems that there's no particular way of identifying what's off limits. There was a tragedy here called the Grenfell Fire, where in London a tower caught fire, and because the cladding on the outside of the tower was of some poor quality or something, that caught fire particularly swiftly, and I think it was like 60 people died. And someone, and like this, it was treated as if this was a racial issue, but it wasn't. The tower block was, very multi-ethnic, but a black chap in London decided to make up a mock diorama of the tower on fire for some reason, as a sort of like dark joke or something. Not that I condone it, but I understand, it's a joke. He's just being a prat.
Yeah.
But he like set that on fire and uploaded that to the internet, and he got like, what was it, 2 months or something in jail, something like that. It was a remarkably punitive sentence that he got for a silly joke, silly joke. And if you want to know where these hate speech laws come from, well, I just point you back to our old friend Tony Blair. It's his initiative, Section 127 of the 2003 Communications Act, which the Conservatives could just get rid of tomorrow if they wanted. Yeah. Tomorrow they could just roll into Parliament and go, right, okay, we're getting rid of that because we own the majority and we can just gone. But they don't. Don't know why.
I would like to encourage all of our listeners to, if you're ever having a very dark day and feeling depressed, just remind yourself that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, Theresa May is miserable right now.
There is always that.
Hey guys, America is under attack and financial markets haven't been this chaotic since 2008. Inflation is at 5.4% because of reckless money printing, and experts are projecting less than 6% returns from equities until 2035. Doesn't take a genius to know that your $100,000 nest egg might turn into $95,000 by the end of the year. So how will the 1% prepare for this nightmare scenario we're in? Trick question. They already have. There's an under-the-radar alternative investment that billionaires are using to protect their vast wealth. Some even hold up to 30% of their entire net worth in it. It's not gold. It's not Bitcoin. It's anything you'd expect. It's fine art. Masterpieces worth millions that hang in museums by artists like Picasso and Warhol. In fact, contemporary art prices outperformed the S&P by 174% from 1995 to 2020. The mega rich have safeguarded their wealth with art while generating big returns for centuries. And now you can too. Masterworks.io is the $1 billion tech company, $1 billion, that's opening the exclusive multi-trillion art universe to you in just a few easy clicks. Their platform lets you invest in multi-million-dollar paintings like a company's stock. Masterworks investors already saw a 32% return in 2020 from their Banksy exit. So don't wait. Head to masterworks.io/welcome to claim your invitation. That's masterworks.io/welcome. And there's important disclosures at masterworks.io/disclaimer.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Pedicy.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying, Jonah Goldberg, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you black pilled or white pilled for the future of the UK?
That's a good question.
What is a man?
What is a man?
What is a man? Do you love white people? What is a no? What is the? Are you white pilled or black pilled? No seriousness, Carl.
No. I love the Jesse Lee piece of questions. I don't think it's actually very optimistic in the short run, because the Conservatives are part of the Build Back Better buddies. You'll notice that lots of national leaders around the world use the phrase Build Back Better, because obviously what Steve Bannon calls the sort of party of Davos, the sort of international Great Reset order, that sort of, World Economic Forum types, they're in on it. Matt Hancock, of course, was part of the Conservative government. He went to the World Economic Forum. They make Klaus Schwab. Boris Johnson was hanging out with Bill Gates the other day. Don't worry about his Epstein connections, I guess. And so the Conservatives are part of the sort of Great Reset crew, the Build Back Better buddies, whatever they call themselves. And so I'm not very optimistic, frankly. But on the plus side, the United Kingdom will probably split up at some point. So Britain will not be Britain anymore. It will be England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, or Northern Ireland. And so that will change the dynamics of things somewhat. Because really Britain was an imperial project. Nobody really wants to accept this, but the English had an empire, the Scottish tried to get an empire, they failed, and so they joined England and take advantage of England's markets, which creates the United Kingdom, and it's a project born of empire. And the empire is over now. The empire is done, and we need to stop thinking in terms of empire, but unfortunately we still do. And so I think it won't be the end of the world when the United Kingdom breaks up, but it will be traumatic to the post-World War II generation. They won't understand how to deal with it because in their mind, it's Britain that defeats the Nazis, and therefore Britain's strong, Britain together. It's like, not really, not since Tony Blair, and you did nothing to stop this. You did nothing to change this. And so this was kind of inevitable. It didn't have to be this way, but the wheels are in motion now, and I think we're just going to have to go until the Scots vote for their own independence, which is their choice. But like I said, it'll change things, because then England doesn't have to subsidize Scotland or Wales. Right. And if there's one thing the English are getting resentful over, and you can see this in polling, I saw a poll a while ago about the Scottish independence referendum, that said if it was done in England, 60% of the English would have just yeeted Scotland out of the United Kingdom, because we're sick of their fucking attitude, frankly. And I'm not joking. There is a widespread resentment against the Scots for having this kind of petty and jealous. And it's the Scottish nationalists. Most Scots are lovely people, obviously, and I've never had a problem with a Scot in my life. But you see their rhetoric. It's like, oh, England's doing this, the English are doing that, and it's like, God, I fucking wish. You make us sound based. No, we're being just as cucked as you are. But there's a deep resentment there, and I think they eventually will vote for independence. And be careful what you wish for, is what I say, because I'm going to be the first person on the barricades screeching that we're not going to give them a penny, because we don't owe them anything, and that they've made their choice. Now they get to fucking live in it. And it won't go well, because the Scottish National Party are running Scotland into the ground in the same way that the Democrats are running California and New York into the ground. They have an assumption about human nature that is just wrong, and they refuse to do those responsible things that need to be done by people in charge. And so Scotland has, record numbers of drug addicts. Their economy is flatlining. Everything's going horribly wrong, but they've got, look at the diversity they have in the positions of power. And so they're just going to continue spiraling downwards, in my opinion, without English money to prop them up. And okay, well, there we go. The problem, though, is England itself is in the middle of a massive identity crisis. Since Tony Blair, there has been a concerted effort to undermine English identity. and English self-awareness. And this has and combine that with mass immigration. Now, we get in 2020, we had 313,000 net immigrants into Britain. That's the product of Tony Blair again, and that's just been the habitual case for the past 20 years. Look at a graph of immigration into the United Kingdom. Well, most of it's to England, and so now I think it's the 3 biggest cities in England are majority non-English. London in 2011 was only 44% English. The 2021 census is going to be coming out at some point this year. That's going to be a fucking bloodbath because it's going to reveal that Birmingham is now 1/3 English. We know this because we can look at the Birmingham schools. The Birmingham schools, we actually have all the ethnic breakdowns in there. And so we know that 1/3 of the children in Birmingham schools are English children. Well, there we go. Now we know how much Birmingham has been affected by mass immigration. And there are going to be a few other towns and cities around the country that have the same problem. And the question then arises, well, how long does this go on for? What happens? Because these numbers add up. And already, like the slow creep of London, the sort of, multiculti diversity, like way stop of the world is just taking over this country. And it's like, right, okay, that can't go on forever. We have to be allowed to say, well, look, could we just tone it down? We've had 20 years of mass immigration. We've got all the diversity we'll ever need now. Can we just stop it? And that at least will be able to be spoken about if England was an independent political entity, I think. So it's not all downsides if the United Kingdom breaks up, but on a sentimental level, it'll be very sad, won't it?
Carl, we're running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your favorite part of this interview?
The references to Jesse Lee Peterson.
You are welcome.